No, you are breathtaking. Hi everyone, Binz here, checking in for episode 4 of Shapez Industries Road to SIMAM. And we have a pretty exciting episode ahead of us today because today we are finally going to get started with the thing that this series is all about, which is building an MAM in Shapez Industries. So, where do we start? That's the question. How are you going to start building an MAM? Right? Where do you start? Well, I figured the point of departure for building an MAM in Shapez Industries is going to be happening by tackling the hardest part of it first. If you get that out of the way, then all the other pieces will fall into place. And the hardest part, without a doubt, for building an MAM in Shapez Industries is going to be the smelting bit. Right? Because a difficult factor when it comes to smelting in Shapez Industries is the fact that it is completely and utterly pointless to paint a shape if you still have to smelt it afterwards. That's basically a first obstacle for building an MAM, because usually MAMs, you would just take your base input shape, then you would paint it, and then you would start stacking it, right? This is an approach that is not going to work for building an MAM in Shapez Industries because of the smelting bit. So the first thing I want to do with you is let's have a look at which possibilities there are for smelting. So we're going to take this regular shape, right? Just a regular circle. This is one possibility for a layer. And the same circle smelted will look like this. But those two things are not the only options there are. And that is kind of the problem. Because your smelted layer could also consist of two smelted halves, for example, like this. And those halves could also be rotated, right? So you would get this. Not only that, but your smelts could also consist of 3/4 plus 1/4. Like, for example, let's see. No, not that. Like this. Right? And then you have the rotations of that. Right, so a smelted shape could also look like that. And not only that, but there is also another possibility, which is this one. A smelted shape could also look like this, a smelted layer. Plus, again, the rotations. So you see, there are a whole lot of possibilities for a smelted layer within this game. And these scenarios right here, they are all assuming that we have 4 quadrants on our layer. So I was thinking about this. How can I create one module that can cope with any of these scenarios? And I found the solution in the study of how to create these shape codes. Looking at these shape codes helped me figure out how the smelting kind of works, right? So let's look at this. Let's look at the shape code for this smelted circle right here. We have our circle quadrant, We have our circle quadrant, and then the smelted quadrants are indicated by underscores. That's how the codes work, right? If this needs to be split, then we have a circle quadrant and one smelted quadrant, a circle quadrant and one smelted quadrant, and that gives us that. For this one, we have the one in the top right, which is indicated with its proper code, and then we have this one, and then the 2 smelted quadrants, right? So you really need to pay attention to which parts are smelted and which ones are defined within the shape code. And I realized something very important, because it is possible to paint these shapes as well, right? For example, like this. This could be a valid layer. This could be a layer. 3/4 are painted red and 1/4 is painted blue. Okay, so, and the more I looked at this, the more I started realizing something. The shape codes, in case you don't know, are top right, bottom left, top left, right? That's the way they work. And each component is made up of a capital letter for the shape and a lowercase letter for the color. So one thing I realized is that you do not necessarily need the same shapes everywhere. So what I could do, for example, is something like this. This would also be a valid shape, where our smelted 3/4 piece is made up of a circle, a square, and a star quadrant. And the code for that looks like this. So the fact that we get 2 underscores each time is kind of misleading. It kind of set me off in the wrong direction. What I actually should be looking at, or the way I should interpret this, is like this. The only thing that matters is whether the color slot is a smelt, is an underscore indicating a smelted quadrant, yes or no, right? And that is what I learned from playing around with a shape like this, for example. Because if you are going to have a smelted piece, then the quadrants that make up that piece all need to have the same color. So what Sense did in terms of the codes for that is he used the color slot, which is always going to be the same one which is always going to be the same color as the first piece in the chain. He used that for the underscore. That is what indicates the smelt. And an important realization for me was the fact that this works, like many things in Shapez.io, this works in clockwise fashion. So, again, if we take this shape, which consists of 4 quadrants, then we have top right, bottom left, top left. So if we replace, let's say, the bottom right piece by an underscore, which indicates smelt, then it means this piece is glued to this piece. Okay? The second quadrant in the bottom right is glued, is smelted with the first quadrant in the top right. That's how that works. So there is always you can always regard smelting in pairs, right? This linear code, this was my biggest realization. This linear code that we read from left to right, actually the way to read it should be circular. Top right, bottom left, top left, right? So for example, if we want to glue the top 2 pieces together, then the part that needs to be smelted in the shape code is the top right, and the top right is the first one in linear fashion. So if we want to glue the top right piece to the top left piece, then our smelt piece goes all the way at the top, all the way in front. And that's how that works, right? So this realization was pretty big for me. If we want to smelt these 2 pieces, then our shape code will look like this, right? This is what it will look like. And this might also be a rectangle, or it might be a star, whatever. This piece will be glued to this piece, and it will immediately, automatically take the color of that piece. So if we do that, for example, this code, then we will get a red circle smelted with a red star at the top and 2 uncolored, unsmelted circles at the bottom, right? Let's demonstrate that. There, that is what that code will look like. Okay, so the realization that I need to start treating this as a rotation, as a loop, rather than a linear code that reads from left to right, that was pretty important because that set me on my path to exploring how we kind of should do this. What we can do, and that is the approach I'm going to take. I am not sure whether there are other approaches, to be honest, but that is the approach I'm going to take, is I'm going to need to analyze a quadrant, and then I'm going to need to detect somehow whether it is smelted to the previous piece, yes or no. That is going to be the core ideology of how this MAM is going to work. Okay? And how can you do that? Well, how can you do that? An easy way to detect smelting, and I think as a matter of fact, the only way, is to cut the signal apart, glue it back together, and see if we get the same thing. And this works in pairs. So we're always going to pair off 2 quadrants with one another. Okay, I'm going to rotate this shape. So one thing I'm gonna give this a color just to make it a little clearer. Okay, let's take a red quadrant, circle, windmill, something like this. Wait for it. There, I think that is a little bit clearer. Okay, so what are we going to do? Let's cut this shape in half, and then let's take. You know what? I'm going to rotate this. As follows. We're going to rotate that. So we're getting this piece. Okay? The thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those quadrants apart. And immediately I'm going to glue them back together by stacking them back together. And now what we can do is compare the cut and restacked output to the original. And if that is the same, then we do not have a smelted piece. And if it is different, then we have a smelted piece. That's how you can do smelt detection for the wiring module in your shape, right? You see, this one is glued together. And if we cut it apart and stack it back, then it will not be glued together anymore. So we break the bonds of the smelt. And with the comparing unit, we can tell whether these things have been broken. Well, I'm going to need to rotate this, I think, because otherwise it's not going to work. Yeah, so we see here the bonds are broken. Here, they are not, and therefore, if we get a 0 from this comparing unit, that means we are dealing with a smelted pair of quadrants. That's important. A smelted pair of quadrants. Okay, so let's unrotate this shape again, so that for transparency purposes, we now start in the top right corner. We are now comparing the top right, which is a red circle, to the bottom right, which is a yellow square. And what do we see? If we cut those apart and we glue them back together, then the outcome is exactly the same as the input. And if that is the case, then those 2 pieces were not smelted. Are you with me? So here we get a 1, and it means that top right and bottom right are not smelted. And they aren't, right? So what we can do is we are going to, excuse me, hello, thank you. Yes, we're going to keep this signal here. This signal tells me if it's a 1. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make this easier on myself. I'm going to put a NOT gate here. So if we get a 0, it means not smelted. If we get a 1, it means yes, it is smelted. So the thing I'm going to do next is I'm going to make that comparison for all of the quadrant pairs. So I'm simply going to copy this, and I'm going to rotate this shape clockwise once. Okay, where is my clockwise rotation thingy? Is that it? That's counterclockwise, right? Do we want, is that, hello, is that what I want? Yes, it is what I want, because the next thing I want to compare, since we are working in clockwise rotation, right? This is kind of confusing, so bear with me. We are working in clockwise rotation. And if we provide this cut, then we are comparing the right-hand side of the shape. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that in this module, these two become the right-hand side of the shape. And in order to do that, we need to rotate it once counterclockwise, right? So now I'm going to compare the square with the star. Both are yellow, and we can see visually that they are indeed smelted. And with exactly the same module, the output here is a 1, which tells us, yes, these two quadrants are smelted. And now let's repeat that for all 4 of them. So if we look at this in our small analyzer module that we've built, we can see, if we know how to interpret the signals, of course, that is, the top right is not smelted with the bottom right. The bottom right is smelted with the bottom left. The bottom left is not smelted with the top left, and the top left is smelted with the top right. That is how we need to interpret these signals. Okay, so let's try with another shape. Let's try with another shape code, for example, this one. Let's see what we get. The top right is not smelted with the bottom right. The bottom right is smelted with the bottom left. The bottom left is smelted with the top right, with the top left, sorry. And the top left is not smelted with the top right. That is how we need to, that is how that works. And that is a pretty efficient analyzer module, in my opinion, that will tell us what we need. Now, how can we put this into a machine? Well, the problem with it is that we need to work in a kind of staircase pattern, right? We are going to need to pair off two kinds of quadrants or two quadrants with each other. And then the output of that, we are going to need to compare that with the next thing. Because if you are dealing with a shape like this one, well, then you have a bond between 3 quadrants, right? So it is, the hard part is that you need to take, if you've taken the bottom right and the bottom left already, then you need to compare that with the top left, and the 3 of them need to be smelted. Okay, so you need to transition somehow from the fact that we are dealing with pairs right here in this module to the fact that your shape smelting might consist of more than just a pair of quadrants, right? It might consist of 3 quadrants. Now, the thing I would like to try to do is create a module that works with that. So I'm going to strip the color away, like so, and this is going to be the shape that we're working with. Now, let's set up some input lines, okay? Because I'm lazy, I am going to use the item producer for this, okay? Because I don't want to, I don't want to go look for this particular shape on the map. It's just, I'm too lazy for that. So what we're going to do, what I am going to do here is I'm going to take the top right, bottom right, bottom left, and top left. So now we can start looking, okay? The first thing, this signal is going to influence what we are going to do with those two belts. Do they need to be smelted, yes or no? So, as a matter of fact, I am going to put these a little farther apart. That's what I'm going to need to do. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space here. So, this signal tells me that these two shapes, these two quadrants, do not need to be smelted. So what are we going to do? How can I go about this? Well, I'm going to need to create a fork in the road, I guess, right? So we're going to give both lines the possibility to go to a side track where they will get, well, first of all, they need to get stacked, right? That is going to be the principle. They need to be stacked, and then they need to be smelted. And they're going to need to do that either yes or no. This is a Boolean output, right? And as a matter of fact, if they do not need to be smelted, then they need to move straight ahead. And in order to move straight ahead, the filters need to be receiving a 0, which means I can get rid of this NOT gate. I hope you're still with me. Can get rid of the NOT gate and connect this signal. So those two do not need to be smelted. And now we are going to repeat the same procedure for the next pair. Let's do that here. And this pair is the bottom right quadrant with the bottom left quadrant. What do we see here? They do need to get smelted, and if they do need to get smelted, then the filters both need to receive a 0 signal. So again, we are going to get rid of the NOT gate, and we are going to connect this 0 signal here. Okay. And the output we get is, hello, is that. Exactly. That is good, because that is what we ultimately need, right? Let's put I'm going to put a display here for clarity purposes. That is what we need. So this is one component done. And now the next issue is the following. I am going to need to do the exact same thing for the third and the fourth quadrant as well. Okay, we get a 1 here, which means these pieces also need to be smelted. And this means that the filters need to receive a 0. But now the problem is that since we have already created this shape, this smelted thing, we need to redirect this into this line, right? Do we not? Yes, we do. So let's put that there, and we are going to need a merger for that. There we go. And now we get this smelted bit right here. Excellent. And now we can bring that back, and we can do the same thing right here. But wait, there is more, because we still have a fourth wire, and the fourth wire tells me whether or not the top left quadrant needs to be smelted with the top right quadrant, right? So we also need to bring those together. So we need another module, like let's say this one, and we would need to bring in this line right here. And then again, get rid of the NOT gate. Okay, so this is the basic structure with which we are going to work. right? And these lines now have to feed into painters potentially, because, as you know, we might get this shape, for example, this one, right? And yeah, this shape, this line would have to be painted blue, and this line would have to be painted red. Now that is something we're going to worry about later, but in any case, that is what we are going to need to be doing. But I don't think we're done yet, because let's have a look. Where are these lines I made? Oh, well, they're right here. Let's see. This is going to get tricky at some point, and I forgot which point. But yeah, let's see. I feel like there are still some obstacles in this approach unaccounted for, but right as of now, I don't really remember what it was. I remember thinking about this and then thinking to myself, oh, this is something I really have to pay attention to. But right now, I forgot what that was. So let's have a look. Is it if we have the top right and the top left smelted? Or is this actually okay? Oh no, I think I remember what it was. If we're dealing with an entirely smelted shape, look at this. If we are dealing with an entirely smelted shape, we are going to run into a problem. Look at this. The first quadrants, the top right and the bottom right, they get smelted, okay? The output of that will get smelted with the next quadrant, which is the bottom left. So let's wait for that. It takes its sweet time. It will come out there. That gets smelted with the final shape, with the final quadrant, the top left quadrant. That comes out here. And now look at this, look at what's happening. Since we are dealing with an entirely smelted shape, all of the four quadrants are going to indicate that they are smelted with the next quadrant in line, and that is going to put all of them into the stackers. But with this setup, there is nothing left coming from this line, right? Because since this gets smelted, it gets output to the next line, and therefore we don't have an input here. And now this fully smelted shape is waiting for something that will never arrive, right? The signal it receives is that it should get smelted with the top right, but the top right input is not given because it is siphoned off to the next line. That is our problem right here. So how can we fix that? Well, for example, I think it should work if only if you are both 0, that should give us a 0, I think. Is that something that works? I think so. I'm not sure yet. I have to look at this. I think we're going to need a NOT gate on this, so that this is what we get. And now let me run a few more shapes through this to see if that is actually correct. Nope, that is not correct. See, in this case, this line should also be moving straight ahead and not into the stacker. And why is that? Because this is not supposed to be an OR gate, it's supposed to be an AND gate, right? Only if both of them are 0 meaning only if both of them are smelts, then the filter should receive a 0, and otherwise it should receive a 1. That's it. So I think with this fix, as a matter of fact, we have our basic smelting module, right? Our ideologic macro structure of how I want to build the smelting module for this MAM. And I think with that, I'm going to wrap up the episode. This is the biggest chunk, I believe. Smelting is going to be the hardest part because we're going to need to come up with a system that does this for each layer, right? Because the smelting only applies to one layer. And obviously, ratio-wise, in order to stack full belts, well, I would need 8 stackers, I would need 10 smelters, etc. And right as of now, this is something I'm going to need to play around with in my own time, probably off camera, I don't know yet. But yeah, this would need to be turned into a full module, a nice module, and then look at the belt layout a bit. But in any case, this is the approach that we are going to use for this shape, for the smelting bit. And I think it's a pretty solid approach. I don't know how many approaches there are. I don't know what the alternatives are, but I am pretty happy with the fact that we figured this out. And that is the principle we are going to base the MAM on. So, hey, I know this was a lot to take. I know I've been rambling on for a while, but then again, I think, this is pretty solid matter. This is pretty intellectual stuff. So I hope it was eye-opening for you. It was eye-opening for me as well. And I hope you're excited to see the next video, because in the next video, we are actually going to start building this thing, right? So if you like this video, as always, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you stay updated, all that good stuff. And hey, I hope to welcome you again in the next video, which will be episode 5. For today, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day. I am signing off. Take care. Bye.